findings of the in-depth review before the Minister has the opportunity to respond. For those journalists taking part in the press webinar, we invite you to submit your questions during the presentation or shortly afterwards via the Zoom, the Q&A function in the Zoom. With that, I'll pass the floor to our Executive Director, Dr. Birol.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mullen. Madam Minister, dear colleagues, very good afternoon to all of you. I would like to open by noting that Belgium has consistently been an active contributor to the IEA's work. I particularly appreciate the leadership of Minister van der Straeten to bring intentional efforts on energy and climate, including most recently as a vice chair of the IEA Ministerial Meeting 2022. I would particularly welcome Belgium's support for our work on clean energy transitions in Africa. Dear colleagues, before turning to the findings of IEA Energy Policy Review of Belgium, I want to highlight some of the key issues in global energy markets today and what the IEA is doing to help its members and beyond to respond. Dear colleagues, when I look at the world today, I see that we are facing three distinct crises. Every night, every day, we are seeing pictures of a humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, which are heartbreaking pictures. We are also, I believe, in the entering the first global energy crisis after the humanitarian crisis. We are entering the first global energy crisis. Very high and volatile energy prices are important proofs of that. But in addition to the humanitarian and energy crisis, there is other crisis that we should not forget, which is the climate crisis. And I would like to say a few things on that as well. But let me start with the energy crisis and how we see it and what we are doing. We are witnessing very high oil, natural gas, and electricity prices in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. When it comes to oil, we have its International Energy Agency member governments. We have released 2 times stocks, oil stocks from our strategic reserves. And when you put 2 recent stock releases out of 5 in the entire history of the IEA, they are significantly over 1.5 million barrels per day. And they are still only 9% of all the stocks we have at the IEA member countries' disposal. This was the first measure that we have taken to push back the crisis. The second one is we are in touch with several producing countries to ask them in such an emergency situation to help to comfort the markets. But third, which I think very important and sometimes underestimated measure that we are taking is how can we reduce the demand of oil? In Europe, we use a lot of oil, especially in the transportation sector. And it's a very well-known fact that in Europe, And in the United States, in summer, the oil demand increases further. In Europe, for example, about significant terms in the world, about 2.5 million barrels per day because of the driving season starts. So we said what we can do in order to reduce the demand for oil, and we came up with a 10-point plan for oil, which we make suggestions from making the public transportation in the cities for free or cheaper, to limiting the speed in the highways for the cars, or incentivizing walking or cycling or public transportation. We have 10 suggestions like that, and we are very happy to see that several governments made use of that. The same applies to the natural gas. We have also a 10-point plan for natural gas. Here, we have also several suggestions ranging from bringing the thermostat 1 degree lower to renovation of the further renovation, extended renovation of the buildings. Those measures not only help to reduce our reliance on Russia, but also reduce the energy bills of the consumers. And at the same time, they are in line with our climate goals. So therefore, we are happy that the European Commission and the IEA tomorrow starting a major new campaign in that direction. And here I would like to comment Belgium, especially Madam Minister, for also taking steps to empower energy consumers. On 7th of April, Madam Minister announced the I Have an Impact information campaign, which aims to assist Ukraine by giving Belgian consumers 5 practical steps relating to heating, mobility, and cooking. Many thanks, Madam Minister, for your leadership here. Dear colleagues, I mentioned to you that we have an energy crisis. We are all trying to push back and address this energy crisis, which might be with us for some time to come. But this energy crisis shouldn't lead to forget our climate crisis. Indeed, our numbers show that last year, the year we have the Glasgow, a major climate summit, global emissions increased to a record high. So this is something worries us, the growing gap between the rhetoric of many governments around the world who made commitments to reach net zero by 2050 and what is happening in the real life. We have, as I mentioned, we have only a few weeks ago, we had our ministerial meeting here in Paris. 40 ministers around the world, several business leaders were there. As I mentioned, Madam Minister was the one of the 3 vice chairs of our ministerial meeting. I was, as head of the IEA, very happy to see that our member countries provided us several new mandates to start a new phase in the International Energy Agency's life. And one of them is, I would like to quote here, our communique saying in the quote, in addition to ensuring global energy security, the IEA has a new guiding principle, supporting countries in the global effort to attain net zero greenhouse gas emissions in the energy sector by mid-century. This is extremely for us. This is a guiding principle for us, and we are going to do our best in order to fulfill this expectation from all our member governments. Now, finally, let me turn to the IEA Energy Policy Review of Belgium. The International Energy Agency conducts in-depth peer reviews of the energy policies of its members every 5 years. It is one of the conditions of being a member. This process supports energy policy development and encourages the exchange of international best practices and experiences to help the drive secure and affordable clean energy transitions. The Energy Policy Review of Belgium was supported by a strong multinational team with the members from United Kingdom, Poland, Czech Republic, Turkey, Netherlands, Norway, European Commission, and Nuclear Energy Agency. I especially thank Mrs. Astrid Zontag from Switzerland for being an excellent team leader. Before handing the floor to my colleague Peter Journey-Keller, our desk officer for Belgium, to present some of the key findings, I would like to go back to 25th of February. It was a day that I was asked to visit Brussels to talk about the world energy outlook, just the day after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. It is, of course, it was a major shock to all of us. And at that meeting, I said that the 24th of February will be a turning point in the energy policy making in Europe. It is for sure. But I also said that there will be a turning point, but it is up to the governments which direction they are going to turn to. In a good direction or a bad direction. Good direction to have a policy for a cleaner and safer energy future. And I see that the Belgian government made a very strong choice, very clear choice, turning in the right direction. As such, I would like to congratulate Madam Minister for leading the energy and climate portfolio in the Belgian government. With these words, I would like to turn to my colleague Peter for some of the findings of our study.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. Since the IEA's last energy policy review, Belgium has made notable progress on energy transition. From 2010 to 2020, the share of renewables in final energy demand doubled from 6% to 12%. Belgium has been particularly successful with offshore wind. In 2021, Belgium had the 6th highest offshore wind capacity in the world. Despite these strong efforts, Belgium faces some significant challenges on its path to energy transition. One of the largest challenges is Belgium's continued reliance on imported fossil fuels, mainly oil and gas. In 2020, fossil fuels covered 75% of energy demand, only a slight reduction from the 77% fossil fuel share in 2010. In addition, fossil fuels remain dominant across the economy, covering 89% of energy demand in transport, 75% in industry, and 67% in buildings. Thanks to its nuclear fleet and growing renewable generation, the electricity sector has a relatively low demand for fossil fuels. Belgium's natural gas supply comes mainly from Norway and the Netherlands, with just 7% of imports coming from Russia in 2020. However, Belgium faces growing pressure in finding new gas supplies as productions from the Netherlands' Groningen field is phased out. Belgium is notably reliant on Russian oil. In 2020, Russia accounted for 28% of crude oil imports and 15% of oil products imports. Stronger efforts are needed to reduce fossil fuel demand, especially in light of increased EU ambitions on climate and energy security. The federal government is committed to phasing out most of Belgium's nuclear generation by 2025. This poses some challenge as nuclear energy is the largest source of electricity generation. To ensure security of supply, Belgium has a capacity mechanism that awards payments through competitive auctions to encourage deploying upgrading, or retaining generation, energy storage, and demand response assets. The first auction took place in October of 2021 for capacity that must be operating by November of 2025. It will likely result in an increase in gas-fired generation, including 2 new gas plants. To address the impacts of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and to lower fossil fuel demand, the federal government decided in March 2022 to take the necessary steps to extend 2 gigawatts of nuclear capacity by 10 years and introduced a 1.2 billion euro package to accelerate energy transition. Work is needed to ensure that the lifetime extension of 2 gigawatts of nuclear and the deployment of projects selected in the capacity auctions can be completed in a timely and cost-effective manner. Reduced nuclear capacity, increased gas-fired generation are expected to drive higher emissions and increased gas imports through at least 2025. After this point, the government expects that growing generation from renewables will drive down emissions. Belgium's National Energy and Climate Plan sets 2030 targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase energy efficiency, and the use of renewable energy. Since Belgium adopted this plan, the EU 2030 target for emissions reductions was increased from 40% to 55%. Stronger EU targets are under consideration for renewables and for energy efficiency. Belgium's existing greenhouse gas target already requires emissions to fall rapidly. Supporting the EU 55% target will require more ambition and stronger measures. Belgium has had notable success in promoting energy efficiency. However, despite demand reductions related mainly to the pandemic, Belgium did not meet its 2020 efficiency targets and has set 2030 targets that allow demand significantly increase. There is need for stronger efficiency measures that are aligned with Belgium's economic goals. In particular, programs addressing energy affordability should also strive to drive sustained demand reductions. Belgium has notably increased renewables, especially for electricity generation. However, more ambitious targets and measures are needed to support the increased EU 2030 targets, especially with regards to renewable heating and cooling. The package to accelerate energy transition, which was adopted in March 2022, includes several items that should help Belgium to boost renewables deployment and support the EU's increased climate ambition. The plan to accelerate deployment, the plan includes efforts to accelerate deployment of the second offshore wind zone, repower the first wind zone, examine creation of a third offshore wind zone, and an offshore electricity grid linking the wind farms and grids of North Sea countries. The package also funds smart EV charging and PV at rail stations and temporary VAT reductions for PV panels, solar thermal collectors, heat pumps, and other measures. Electrification is a central aspect of Belgium's energy transition. However, Belgium's electricity prices are the second highest in the IEA with a high tax component, while gas and heating oil prices and taxes are among the lowest in the IEA. Belgium needs to work harder to increase the cost competitiveness of electricity against fossil fuels, especially for heating and mobility. Proper price signals are one of the best measures to drive consumers towards cleaner and more efficient options. The goals of electrification also require strong investments in the electricity grid. Belgium has had great success in expanding its offshore electricity grid to drive offshore wind deployment. But a significant expansion of onshore electricity transmission and distribution infrastructure is required to support electrification and the increased system flexibility needed to integrate higher shares of generation from wind and PV. Timely approval and permitting processes for infrastructure projects are essential to meet energy transition goals and assure electricity supply. Let me now hand the floor back to Dr. Birol to present the key recommendations in the report.
Thank you very much. Now, to finish our presentation, we have 5 recommendations from our report that I would like to share with you. There are many recommendations, but I have chosen 5 of them. The first one is that we believe to push a secure and sustainable energy transition, Belgian government should develop new targets and measures to support the EU 2030 targets and 2050 carbon neutrality, and to provide long-term certainty for decarbonization investments. In this respect, we commend the government's recently announced 1.2 billion euro package to accelerate clean energy transitions, and I think it is a right step in the right direction. The second is on energy efficiency, to develop measures to drive sustained improvements in energy efficiency across all sectors, especially in the heavy industry sector, to remain competitive, passes through having more and stronger energy efficiency policies in place. Plus, we believe more action might be needed on building renovations. Third, on the renewable side, we have seen a great success recently on the offshore wind. But in order to go further, permitting is a critical challenge, and the streamlining for permitting and making it much faster is a key challenge, we think. And also there is a need for paying more attention on the onshore grid developments. For the ongoing events, the geopolitical events we have been talking, they present new challenges to policymakers, and we believe we have to reassess the role of all options we have in line with our climate targets while maintaining energy security, including a larger role for energy storage and demand side management. Fifth and finally, I think Belgian government needs to ensure that the efforts supporting energy affordability also foster energy efficiency and deployment of renewable energy. To date, programs for energy poverty and to address higher prices focus mainly on temporary tax cuts and other measures to directly lower the cost of energy. We believe these efforts need to be expanded to also clearly support energy efficiency and renewables, so that there is a more and permanent price relief. So with this, I would like to stop here. All our recommendation analysis are in our report, which is publicly available in our website. Over to you, Mr. Malan.
Thank you, Dr. Birol and Mr. Johnny Kaler for the presentation. We now would like to hear from Minister van der Straeten of Belgium for her thoughts on the IEA's policy review. Madam Minister.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon, Dr. Birol. Congratulations yet again on your new term to lead once again IEA at these specific and these challenging times, and as you mentioned, with the new mandates. I think we are all very proud and very honored that in this challenging time that we have an experienced captain on board. I would also like to extend my gratitude and my appreciation to the whole organization of International Energy Agency, and specifically to the project team to have done this work on the in-depth review, which has taken many meetings between us and long and fruitful discussions, and that we can all be very happy with the result here in front of us. This country report gives an overview of the energy policy of all governments in this country. We are four of us, who have different competences with regards to energy. But this one report gives an overview of the state of affairs and also the result of the policies of the past years. But if you allow me, and Difate, you've also mentioned this in your introductory remarks, we cannot not read this report in light of the recent events. And so and I was very happy with the selection of the 5 recommendations that you took out of the extensive report. 5 recommendations that are key to accelerate the energy transition and to reduce our imports from fossil fuels. The world has changed for IEA, for us as member countries, for Belgium specifically, and it has also have had an impact on the energy choices that we made, decisions that we have been reviewing and accelerating the energy transition. That's not only the case in Belgium, that's also the case in many other countries, and that's also the case for IEA. As you've mentioned, Fatih, the stock release, only the 4th and the 5th time, the 2 stock releases, and the stock releases have only been done in very exceptional circumstances, as is now also the case with the war in the Ukraine. But the war in Ukraine is not the only crisis, as was also mentioned by Dr. Birol. For years, energy has been at the heart of the global climate ambitions. And we know that fighting climate change is important and necessary to protect future generations. The horrific and shocking war in Ukraine makes clear that energy is about much more. It's also about protecting today's generations. It's about national and international security. And energy is indeed more crucial than ever. We are experiencing the greatest energy crisis ever in Europe and in our country. The war in Ukraine painfully exposes how dependent our country is on energy from abroad. It was also mentioned in the slides. More than 90% of our energy today is imported. From Russia, we import 30% of our oil, 20% of our uranium, and also up to 6% of our natural gas. Geopolitical threats of cutting on fossil fuels have a huge impact on the international energy markets. And it's precisely because we are so dependent on fossil energy that energy prices soar, putting pressure on Belgian households and Belgian industries and Belgian companies, causing the highest inflation in decades and meaning hardship for many of our citizens. In an interconnected European grid, the security of electricity supply is aided, but also dependent on political and investment decisions in other member states. Reliability of generation capacity is key in ensuring security of supply, both at home and in neighboring countries. And in recent months, Belgium has also experienced price impacts of security of supply challenges in neighboring countries, and I refer to France. Hence, diversification and investment in reliable generation capacities is essential. Energy is a matter of national security. It is a lifeline of our economy and a lifeline of our society. At the same time, the energy transition is crucial to meet the vital climate objectives. And I will identify 3 takeaways from the energy policy review, and also the 3 takeaways that will guide our work in governments. First takeaway, and probably the most important one, is the acceleration of the energy transition. As Dr. Birol mentioned, it's now up to countries to decide in which direction they are going. And our direction is very clear, is the path of 100% renewable energy. As clearly demonstrated in the recent published 6th assessment report of the IPCC, sun and wind have been put forward as the main challenges, but also and foremost as big opportunities in achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Wind and sun are the future. They do not emit any CO2. They have no waste with huge disposal costs. Wind turbines and solar panels generate power with 0 fuel costs, allowing to lower the price for consumers and for companies. And most important, wind and sun cannot be weaponized. And we in Belgium, we decided very clearly to accelerate this transition to 100% renewable energy. It was specifically also the war in Ukraine that made us to decide that we wanted to go faster. And in the coming years, 1 gigawatt of renewable energy will be added annually. By 2030, more than 50% of our electricity production will be renewable, which is double of our target today. And we are reducing 15% of pure and fossil fuel consumption. At today's high prices, that will save our economy 18 billion euros in gas and oil and a reduction of 29 million tons of CO2 by 2030. But most important now is that the time for planning is over. Now we have to execute, execute, execute. It's now the time for implementing the plans we made. And that means that permits must be granted more quickly. Between the plan to build wind turbine and realization, there is sometimes a gap of more than 7 weeks. That could be cut in half. Permitting procedures are very important to review. But it also requires leadership. The IEA has expressed concerns about the time required to obtain permits for the construction of transmission infrastructure and generation facilities, specifically onshore wind and large-scale solar PV. Timely project permitting is essential, especially given the support to strong deployment of renewable energy needed to meet the energy transition goals. Implementation must take account of local residents and public interest, but not deciding is also designing. It means longer dependence on fossil, Russian gas, and more expensive energy bills. The undeniable reality is that to secure our economy against geopolitical disruptions, we must transition to a clean energy future. And the second takeaway is to reduce our fossil fuel reliance. It is precisely because we are so dependent on fossil energy that energy prices soar. Our economy and our wallets are being drained. Our entire economy and society are addicted to fossil fuels. It is therefore not possible to solve everything with one miracle measure. It requires a far-reaching approach at all policy levels. And Dr. Birol has referred to the Belgian campaign, I Have an Impact. And this campaign was specifically inspired by the 10-point plans that I launched, the 10-point plan on oil and 10-point plan on gas. And we are not the only country to do so. Also, our neighboring countries like the Netherlands, France, also Germany, launched such campaigns on smart energy consumption. Simple tips to reduce consumption while saving money. Many small steps make a big difference. What's also important is thorough insulation. Our houses consume more energy than in cold Sweden. We almost literally burn up our money because of the drafty doors and windows. Saving energy is the most efficient way. The energy you don't use is the cheapest energy. And solar panels on every roof. It's a no-brainer. Every roof with solar panels immediately reduces the energy bills. And the third takeaway is affordable energy. Leave no one behind. To accelerate the energy transition, we need always to work on affordability and also on direct participation of our citizens. Because that's where the shoe pinches today. Families are using their savings to pay their energy bills instead of investing in insulation or solar panels. While these will pay for themselves within a few years, moreover, investments in renewable energy are also investments in their own country with local jobs. We need to apply the principle of leaving no one behind. And I was a very proud member of the IEA Commission on people-centered energy transitions. And these were specifically the challenges we worked together with several countries, several member countries of IEA to address these specific challenges. Dr. Fatih Birol, as mentioned, has referred to the 3 packages of measures that we already decided today within Belgium. And yes, you are right, dear Fatih. And these are short-term measures. Short-term measures, they are a painkiller and we need a long-term treatment. I fully agree with you, but you know also that these temporary measures are also necessary today, but I fully agree that we cannot limit us to these specific short-term measures. Also, what I'd like to add to this point is that what member states can do at the European level that I'm speaking now, is at this point, what we can do, the point is reached. And we can do more at the European level. And we, as a member state of the European Union, we have been pleading for having a freeze on the gas price in combination with group purchasing. And this is how we deprive Putin of a weapon. As stated by the IEA, a change in the tariff is needed to ensure that electricity prices align with the energy transition goals. Lower electricity prices are also key to improve the situation of vulnerable households and help foster industrial competitiveness. This is something that we are working on currently within our government, and I hope that we can reach a solution very soon. The global energy transition and the global energy challenges are shared responsibilities between our Belgian governments, regions, but also international organizations. Also the industry, academic institutions, and citizens. Cooperation is the key word, both internationally and in our country, because you go faster alone, but you get further together. And this is an African saying. And as you've mentioned, we are very happy that the focus within IEA on sub-Saharan Africa is also high on the radar, also of you, Fatih, personally. Cooperation is key in granting the necessary permits so that the energy transition is accelerated rather than delayed, but also to harmonize policies so that the citizens are given clarity and certainty regarding premiums, the composition of energy bills, and so on. And cooperation to convert the objective from theory to practice. Our success will depend entirely on cooperation, and we will achieve it when we join forces all together. So thank you yet again for all the work that you have been doing. And I'm looking forward for the next 5-year review, which will then be a review of my policies. So I don't know if I will be there as a minister, but even if I'm not a minister, I will read the report on the website or participate in maybe a physical gathering when you will be discussing these next lessons. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister van der Straeten, for those comments. We now have time for a few questions from journalists. We invite the journalists who are attending in the Zoom to send your questions via the Q&A function, and please, if possible, state your name and the media organization you're affiliated to. We're just going to take a 2-minute break for you to submit your questions. We'll be back very shortly. Thank you. To the journalists for your questions. We've got several, and please do submit more if you have time. So the first question, we're going to do one for our executive director, and then one for the minister. The first one is about energy efficiency. The IEA report points to the role that energy efficiency can play, especially in buildings. But what are some concrete steps that can be taken to reduce energy demand in buildings? And then the question for the minister is from Lyubov Pronina of Bloomberg News. Could you please detail what you have managed to agree on in talks with ENGIE on prolonging the lifetime of the 2 nuclear reactors? How will it be financed? So the first question to Dr. Birol about energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency in buildings is, of course, a critical issue, and it covers many aspects. But one of them is especially talking about the gas and the heating season is renovation, because the gas demand in Europe, including Belgium, peaks during the winter season when the heating needs go up. And just to put it in a context, today in Europe, 1% of all the buildings being renovated. And our numbers show that if we provide incentives to consumers, the owners of the households, as Belgian government is planning to do, if it goes from 1% to 2% of the buildings are renovated, the difference between the savings of 1% renovation to 2% renovation is equal to 20 billion cubic meters, 20 BCM, which is again equal to the Nord Stream 1 amount of gas coming from Russia. So by renovating our buildings, we can reduce the Russian gas, reduce the reliance, and also keep the gas bills in our pocket and help the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. And then, so the next question was for Minister van der Straeten regarding the nuclear reactors.
Yes, thank you for all those questions about nuclear reactors. It's also very funny that this takes all the attention because the extension of the lifetime of 2 of our nuclear reactors is only one point in a global plan, which is on the acceleration of the energy transition. As I've mentioned, that the coming years we will add 1 gigawatt additionally each year. And as we've seen in the in-depth review and also in the recommendations of IEA, is that we have a huge responsibility to increase even further and even faster our renewable deployment. And in order to ensure our energy security, what we do on renewable energy is very, very, very important. With regard to the questions of the negotiations, maybe if you can put the questions. It was a question from Lyubov Kranina from Bloomberg News about what we have managed to agree on in talks with ENGIE on this prolongation of the lifetime, and how will it be financed. Too early to tell. And I'm sorry to spoil the party here. But these negotiations and these talks are still going on, and a good negotiation is held in good faith, and that means that we do it around the table. The intended deadline of these talks is in June. This is common and public knowledge, and we are in a very constructive mood, both the Belgian government and ENGIE, and so we will see how this will turn out, but I'm very confident that we will work it out. Did the invasion of Ukraine influence our thinking? Yes, of course. The invasion of Ukraine, it was a life changer. It was, as Fatih mentioned, we will vote together in Brussels. It was a presentation of the World Energy Outlook, and I think that neither he nor him will forget about this specific presentation. It was a very green moment. It was in the morning, late morning and in early morning. Russia invaded Ukraine, and I still have chickenpox when I think back to that specific moment. Yes, we wanted to reduce our imports from Russia and also our imports of fossil fuels. As you know, we had this nuclear phase-out law since 2003. This was not prepared. And so that meant that we had to pass, we had to manage our transition through gas-fired power plants. And that means that we wanted to lower this impact, and that we decided to look into the possibility to the extension of 2 of the nuclear reactors. And there's also someone asking why only 2 and not more. If you allow me to rephrase your question, answer is very simple. We have now 7 nuclear reactors. 3 out of 7 are the oldest ones, Doel 1, 2, and also Tinne 1. So they have difficulties and need huge investments. It's even not clear if investments can bring them up to RENRA in security standards. And then we have 2 nuclear reactors with micro fissures. You see today the impact of fissures in the French nuclear fleet. And then we have those 2 most recent, 1 gigawatt each. These are modern machines who probably need less investments. And that's why we decided to limit it to 2 nuclear power plants, which is also the specific request of our nuclear operator, who himself does not want to extend the lifetime of any of its other nuclear power plants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister van der Straeten. Just 2 more questions that we have time for before we wrap up. One of them is for Dr. Birol, asking regarding the new campaign with the European Commission on energy saving that you mentioned. Can you please elaborate a little? And a question for Minister van der Straeten is, what can Belgium do to quickly lower its fossil fuel dependence? So first question to Dr. Birol.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, after we have prepared our 2 10-point plans for oil and gas, we have been in discussions with our colleagues in European Commission, and we have said that it is good to look at different options to get more production, non-Russian production of oil and gas from this or that country. But there is also a need to look at the demand side, and there is a need for different actors to play a role here. So we are going to start the campaign tomorrow, bringing several mayors in Europe and beyond, trade unions, consumer organizations, and governments, how we can implement some of the key measures we set through increasing the awareness of the consumers. This is going to be directed to the consumers to make them well aware of several behavior changes they may implement and their positive implications, and they have a part to play in fighting against Russia, reducing the energy bills, and making a positive contribution in our fight against climate change. The campaign is starting tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. And for Minister van der Straeten, the question was, what can Belgium do to quickly lower its reliance on fossil fuels?
What we have decided, not only at the federal level, but also at regional level, specifically in Flanders, is to, at federal level, to lower our VAT on solar panels and also energy efficiency. And at the same time, at regional level, they decided to augment the premiums and subsidies for solar panels, but also for heat pumps. And so we have in Belgium, and specifically in Flanders, we have many houses that are heat pump ready, but they didn't do the investment because it was not affordable at the time. But this has changed now with these high energy prices. And so what we have already, these measures that we have decided upon, means that these investments can be quickly made so that we can immediately begin reducing our fossil dependence. And this can be done very, very quickly. But we need to work on non-market barriers, because many of these investments are now are now economically viable, but that doesn't mean that someone has upfront cash, for example, and that they can manage to do the investment. This will be a sustained policy effort, and the most important thing is efficiency. 50% of the gas in Belgium is used in heating, in buildings, in houses, and so that should be the primary focus.
Thank you very much, Minister van der Straeten. Thank you, Dr. Birol and Mr. Journey-Kayla. Thank you to the journalists for the questions and to everyone who was following online for your interest in our work. That concludes our press conference for today. Thank you and goodbye.